everyone, this is Heather, and I hope you're doing well. I am creating this screencast and presenting you with a few PowerPoint slides today because I think that SA2 is, I know that this week you're getting started on SA2, you're ramping up, and I find that this unit is one that's just chock full of information, and it's all good information, but there's a lot of information in the textbook, in the course material that's on Angel, even in the assignment sheet. And as I mentioned before, I haven't created this course, and I don't write the assignment sheets. So there are certain times during the term that I might step in and provide you a little bit more guidance because I want to make working on an essay something that you feel that you understand. And I know if I were in your position, I'd have a little bit of difficulty, I think, sorting through all of the good information that's presented in this unit and knowing exactly how to get started and what to emphasize and work on for Essay 2. So I appreciate your taking the time to listen to this, and I hope that it's a help to you. Of course, I want you to email me and be in contact with me as you have questions about this unit, because it's a pretty challenging one, but I think it's a good one and one that you can all do well on if you give it some time and attention. Okay, so let's talk about what Essay 2 is all about and what exactly this assignment is asking of you, because the assignment sheet is pretty long in and of itself. So I would break down what assignment 2 is asking you to do into 3 main categories. The first one is that it's asking you to analyze an editorial that you have chosen. And some of you have chosen an editorial, some of you have chosen an opinion piece. I'm just going to use the word editorial as I talk here. Excuse me. But what I mean by that is the article that you sent me via email and asked me permission to use for this assignment. So if you sent me something, I should have gotten back to you about that already. And that's what I'm talking about when I say editorial. So the first goal of this assignment is to take that editorial, read it closely, summarize the contents, and identify some of the features, all in an effort to analyze what that article is doing. The second point of this assignment is to take that analysis and use it as a basis for evaluating the editorial. And when I say evaluating the editorial, that means saying, in general, how effective you think it is in doing the job it sets out to do. Okay, so you will make a claim about the effectiveness of the article based on a lot of features and factors that we'll talk about in just a moment. The third part of this assignment is really kind of the icing on the cake, and that is to state your own position on the editorial's topic. The assignment sheet asks you to introduce this information in the thesis or the early part of the essay. It's important to understand this last part well, because you've been asked to find an editorial that is of interest to you. It's something that addresses a topic that you find to be important or interesting. So you want your position on the editorial to shape your thinking and shape your writing about this assignment, but you don't want it to take over. You want to mostly focus on analysis of the editorial and evaluation. And so I'll give you some tips on how to bring in your opinion in a way that doesn't kind of take over your assignment and allows you to still practice this analysis and evaluation. Okay, so our first step is to analyze the editorial, and I want to help you think about how you might do this. So my first tip is to probably print out or have an online version of that article that you chose that you can annotate in some way. You can mark up, highlight, circle words, circle ideas, write notes on that copy. So you want to start with that. What kind of analysis will you do? Well, I think a good place to get started is to replicate what you did with the pirate article for last week's activity for class. So you can summarize the article. What is in the article? What are the paragraphs saying? What's the content that's being presented? Now here's an important point, and this is something that I need to make sure that you all understand. You also need to summarize the opinion that is being advanced in the article. You've all chosen an article. I've approved an article that is an opinion piece. It's not just an essay with factual information. The overall point of the article is to say that you should do something, something should happen, readers should think something, readers should agree with the point, readers should not act in a certain way. There's a should involved in every single one of your opinion pieces. So you need to make sure that you identify what that opinion is that the author is trying to advance. What is the author's opinion that she's really developing in this article? Okay, now there are other few outside factors that I think really can help with analysis and make it smart and informed. This first one is, it's sometimes a little bit hard to identify who is the audience or the intended audience for this particular piece. Now you can't know this for sure a lot of times. This is not a science. This is just taking a good educated guess. If you're working with an opinion piece from a local newspaper that deals with a local issue, then the intended audience is probably going to be the local community. If you're working with an article from the Collegian, then the audience is probably the Penn State community. If you're working with an issue that's in a national paper, perhaps you have a really broad audience that the author is addressing, or maybe a pretty broad audience, but you can kind of narrow that audience in some way or form. The point here is that when we think about audience, it gives us a basis for that evaluation that we're going to do later. Because we can start to think about, well, if the goal of this opinion piece is to address this audience and persuade them to think something or do something, then the effectiveness of the author in doing that is really based on how he or she reaches out to that audience, and maybe what the audience thinks, what opinions the audience might hold, what the audience already knows or does not know about the issue that's being addressed, things of that nature. So you really want to start to think about who that audience might be and how you might characterize them. Similarly, we know that issues don't arise in a bubble out of nowhere. Usually there's some debate, there's some background information that we need to kind of understand. And this too will help you have a smart and well thought evaluation of the article. Now, I don't mean here that you need to go back and start pulling every debate related to this, every publication related to this issue from the last 5 years, but you want to know that you kind of have a larger sense of the schools of thought around this particular issue. What are some of the major factors that come into play? Just generally having this sort of education and identifying any information, especially in the article that you might not be familiar with, is a really good place to start your analysis and then base your evaluation on this contextual information. And finally, one of the things that you practiced when you worked with the Pirate article last week is not just summarizing the content, but really identifying the functions of different things that appeared in the articles. What is the function of each of the paragraphs? What type of evidence is used to support the author's opinions or claims? And what is the function of that evidence? You can also analyze and identify some of the assumptions that circulate in the article without being stated. So what are some of the things that the author assumes about the issue or the value of the issue, the importance of the issue, assumptions that are made about the audience and their values and interests, things of that nature. You can also analyze the organization of the document itself. So, what is kind of the order of information that's presented in the editorial piece? What is most emphasized? What is least emphasized? How does the information all fit together? Sometimes that can give you some clues about whether the article is working well or it's not working so well. Okay, so hopefully you've taken these notes, you've annotated your document, and you have some of these ideas that you're kind of chewing on. And at that point, before you come up with your evaluative claim, you might want to take a step back, even reread the editorial again. And then you really want to transition and think, based on all of the analysis I'm working on, how would I evaluate the effectiveness of this article? Do I think it's really effective? Do I think it's somewhat effective? Do I think it's not very effective at all? Okay. And we want to think about the effectiveness not only based on kind of our agreement or disagreement with the author based on the issue at hand, but also how the author states their opinion, what they're actually driving at, given the audience, given the context, given the sort of features of how the piece of writing is put together. Okay, so that's what you're going to base your overall evaluative claim on. And as you do that, and you start to think about how you're going to cobble together this essay, then you need to start to kind of pick and choose from that analysis list, that list of notes that you have. If you think that the article is very effective, what are the specific things that you can point to in the article and reasons that you think make it very effective? Or if it's not very effective, what are the reasons that it isn't effective? The order of the paragraphs, the evidence that's used, the specific language that the author presents. Any of these things and anything else that you can find can be fair game. The point here is to not just make general broad claims, but to really say, I've looked carefully, I've thought about this article, I've analyzed it, I thought about how it comes together as a piece of writing, the choices that the author made in writing it, and here is my evaluation based on those specific details that I've identified. Okay, and then I said that the last piece of putting your ideas together is adding your opinion. What is your take on this particular issue? Okay, so you have sort of a skeleton of analysis in place. You have these notes, and they're starting to kind of come together. And you, as you point to what your evaluation of the overall article is, and the reasons you think that the article is effective or not so effective, you can really develop your ideas based on your own position. So for example, you might bring in your own perspective based on your work as a professional or a worker in a particular industry, your experience living in a particular part of the country. This is all, anything that you can bring in that's your own lived experience or your own area of expertise. That's known as your ethos or your credibility, as someone who can speak intelligently and meaningfully to the issue. Perhaps you think that the editorial is not very effective because it's really overlooking something very important. And again, you can base that on what's in the article or what's not in the article, but really develop that idea by talking about your own perspective, maybe some of the research that you did in thinking about this issue, your lived experience, etc. And finally, I just like to finish this portion of the screencast by saying that, there's kind of a mashup here. There's kind of a coming together of your ideas about evaluation and your own opinion. And I can see how that can be confusing about how those two come together. So I've given you a couple different general statements, and this isn't exactly what you would write in your essay necessarily, but just so you can understand that you might agree with the position and find the article effective based on your analysis, or maybe ineffective. You can disagree with the person's position, but find the article to be effective, or maybe it is ineffective. And finally, this last point, it's very helpful and totally reasonable to say that you agree with some of the author's points, you disagree with others, but overall you find the editorial to be, and then state your own level of evaluation, your own evaluation of the level of effectiveness. Okay. I think that is enough for this round. Look at the next screencast and we'll kind of finish up from there.